There's nothing like a nice beer. And I've often wondered what makes a good beer. Why does a Budweiser give me a headache after one drink, but a good German Weissen doesn't give me any kind of headache, even after a few of them? Is it the ingredients? Is it the way it's brewed? I'm not sure. Hopefully in today's video though, those questions will be answered. But more specifically, is why is German beer more famous? Hi, my name is Nate and welcome to another reaction video. If you are new here, thank you for joining me. I often do reaction videos, typically comparing the United States with other parts of the world, but I also react to specific things about other countries. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. So today I'm going to react to one of Feely's videos, and I will leave the link to the original video down below, but she's going in and talking about why German beer is so famous. So let's just get into the video.
Friday was International Beer Day, and as you probably know, Germany is famous for its beer culture, but what makes German beer so special?
It's so special because it's damn good. That's why it's special.
Hallo, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. For the last 7 years, I've lived here in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I was born and raised in Munich, Germany, a city that's famous for many things, one of them being beer. The oldest brewery in Munich, Augustinerbräu, was actually founded sometime around 1328 to 1411, so over 600 years ago, which goes to show how much history and tradition beer has in Munich. And not just there. If we travel just 30 kilometers north of Munich to a town called Freising, we'll actually get to the oldest brewery in the world, the Bayerische Staatsbrauerei Weinstefan, that was founded around the year 1040. Like most breweries at that time, it was founded by monks at a monastery. In this case, at the Benedictine Weinstefan Abbey, located on top of the Weinstefan Hill. Even though the monastery was dissolved in 1803, the brewery is still very active to this day. They even have a whole campus right next to the brewery that belongs to the Technical University Munich, where you can get your bachelor's and master's degree in brewing and beverage technology. In case
That would be interesting. Side note, she said that this was started by monks, and I will tell you that the best beer ever that I've had came from a monastery in Kreuzberg, brewed by monks, and you can only buy it at the monastery. They don't distribute to shops or stores or anything like that. You have to go to the monastery. They're only open in the summer. It's on top of a mountain, and you can buy, you can go get mugs of beer or buy what we call them here in the US growlers, but basically 1 liter, 2 liter, 3 liter jugs of beer. And it's a dark beer, and it is probably the smoothest. It's absolutely wonderful. So the monks really got this process down.
get your bachelor's and master's degree in brewing and beverage technology, in case any of you are interested in that. And I actually noticed that Weinstefaner beer shows up on a lot of menus here in the US, more so than other German beers. So you may have seen or even tried it before. Apparently they export beer to over 50 different countries, and they're not the only German brewery that is known internationally. German beer is considered some of the best beer in the world. It's a huge part of German culture and of pretty much every German stereotype. But what's so special about German beer? What's the secret? The most common answer to this question is the German Reinheitsgebot, the purity law, which says that beer can only be made from barley, hops, and water. The roots of the purity law go back hundreds of years, and to really understand how it came about and how it has affected German beer throughout history, we need to back up a little. Beer has been around for thousands of years, and even though I wish I could tell you something different, it was most likely not invented by Germans or by Germanic tribes. Instead, it was probably discovered by accident in lots of different places, most likely during the process of baking bread. The oldest archaeological evidence of beer residues was found in Israel and dates back about 13,000 years. To make beer, you need a grain, usually barley that has already sprouted, and once that happens, it's also referred to as malt. Then you need yeast, which is a fungus, and water. If all of those things come together in relatively warm temperatures, the yeast will turn the glucose in the grain into alcohol and carbonation. That process is called fermentation, and it's what turns the ingredients into beer. So once humans started growing grains to bake bread and stored those grains, which was probably around 15,000 years ago, those exact circumstances were most likely created every now and then, which led to an early version of beer that people then tried to recreate. By the year 3000 BC, civilizations in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt had fully established brewing cultures. It's estimated that up to 40% of their grain was used for brewing, and beer became an important commodity. In Egypt, it was even used as a currency to pay workers. Fun fact, because the beer wasn't typically filtered at the time, the Egyptians actually drank their beer with straws to avoid drinking the grain pieces that were swimming around. At the time, beer was also
Not recommended today to drink any alcoholic beverage through a straw. I did that once a while ago, and it's a quick way to drink a lot more than you think you're drinking.
a lot sweeter than it is today, mainly because it didn't contain any hops yet, and it's often said that beer was actually safer to drink than water because the alcohol in the beer killed all of the germs. However, according to beer historian Max Nelson, that's actually a myth. He says that even the ancient Greeks already knew that boiling water purified it, so according to him, people chose to drink beer because they enjoyed it and not because they had to. Now, throughout the time period of ancient Greece and the Roman Empire, wine actually became more and more popular, and since it lasted longer too, it slowly started to replace beer as a commodity. In fact, the Romans viewed beer as a low-class and unmanly beverage that was for slaves and barbarians, such as the Germanic tribes outside of the borders of the Roman Empire. The cliché of the beer-drinking barbarian up north was actually pretty well known at the time, and hey, thousands of years later, Germans are still known for drinking beer. From the Middle Ages up until the modern era, brewing mainly took place at home, and it was actually considered a woman's job, as it was closely related to baking and cooking. The German reformer Martin Luther even stated publicly that his wife, Katharina von Bora, brewed excellent beer. Starting in the 7th century, monks in Germany and other European regions began to brew beer in a more professional way and on a larger scale. Beer was an essential source of nutrition for them during Lent to keep up their calorie intake. That was also the time that hops were added to the beer, for preservation, but also for the flavor. Hops give beer its typical, slightly bitter taste. Around the year 1500, when the early modern ages started and the big time of monasteries was over, more and more actual breweries started popping up, and brewing beer became commercialized and was increasingly targeted towards mass consumption, which led to a lot of competition among brewers, so many of them started mixing additional ingredients into their beers. Sometimes they did this for economic reasons or for preservation. Other times it was to stand out and to offer people a different flavor palette or stronger psychedelic effects. They would add toxic mushrooms, for example, or belladonnas, or wormwood, among other things. This was one of the reasons why on April 23rd in the year 1516, the Bavarian dukes passed a Landesverordnung, a state ordinance that included a beer price cap and regulated which ingredients were allowed to be used in beer. And that was only 3: barley, hops, and water. Yeast wasn't actually mentioned in this regulation, maybe because people didn't actually figure out how yeast worked exactly until the 19th century, but since they did know that it's always been a crucial part of the brewing process, it's assumed that that was just implied. In addition to ensuring a high quality of beer and restricting psychedelic substances, which weren't exactly welcomed in Catholic Bavaria, the regulation was also supposed to ensure that wheat, Weizen, and rye, Roggen, were reserved for bread baking. And another reason for this may have been that beers from northern Germany and the Rhineland often contained additives that didn't grow in Bavaria, so banning those ingredients made sure that local Bavarian brewers had a competitive advantage. Even though the Bavarian regulation from 1516 was actually preceded by various similar regulations on the local levels, this is the one that is still relevant and celebrated to this day. In fact, 2016 marked the 500th anniversary of the purity law, which was celebrated widely throughout Germany.
It's also quite a pleasure to be here as Germans celebrate the 500th anniversary of your beer purity law. I may join you in that celebration.
Even though technically, the purity law has not been a continuous thing for the last 500 years. If we're being precise here, it really only lasted for 35 years until in 1551, Bavaria allowed the use of coriander and laurel in beer brewing. And 100 years later, in 1616, they also allowed salt, juniper, and caraway. In addition to all of this, a baron called Freiherr von Degenberg was granted an exception from the law in 1548 that allowed him to brew wheat beer, so Hefeweizen, or in Bavaria also called Weissbier, which obviously uses wheat instead of barley. And when his family line ended about 50 years later, that special permission was transferred to the Bavarian Duke, Maximilian I, who immediately took advantage of it and opened several wheat beer breweries.
And I have to thank both of them very much, because a good Weizen beer is my favorite, hands down, of any of the beers. I always drink the Hefeweizen. When we go over to Germany, they also sell it here in the US. I can get it down at the local Total Wine. Hands down, my favorite. So thank you to those two gentlemen for continuing with the wheat side of beer.
It's actually kind of ironic that wheat beer was banned for a while, considering that today it's one of the most popular beers in Bavaria. It wasn't until the 19th century that the original 3-ingredient purity law became a thing again in Bavaria. And when Germany finally unified to become the German Empire in 1871, Bavaria insisted on keeping their purity law, but it wasn't until 1906 that it actually became a consistent law all over Germany. But this time, it clearly stated that the barley, hops, yeast, and water rule only applied to bottom fermented beer, such as Pilsner and Lager, while top fermented beer, including Hefeweizen, Kölsch, and Altbier, was allowed to include other types of malt, like malt from wheat or rye, as well as certain sugars, sweeteners, and dyes. And that's pretty much the same law that's still in place today. The most recent version of the law is from 1993 and has the beautiful and not at all clunky name Verordnung zur Durchführung des vorläufigen Biergesetzes, and it does in fact still apply to all beers that are brewed in Germany to this day, with a few exceptions. In the German states of Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, the regulation is actually even stricter. They don't allow any sugars, even for top fermented beers. And in Bavaria, the law also applies to beer that's brewed to be exported, while in the rest of Germany, beer for export can actually depart from the restrictions of the law. Also, since 1987, beer from outside of Germany can officially be sold in Germany, even if it doesn't follow the guidelines of the purity law. But even though it is true that a version of that original law from 1516...
Why on earth would you go all the way to Germany and buy an American beer? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Is in fact in place in modern day Germany, there are a few misconceptions that are worth mentioning. For one, it's not technically correct to speak of 500 years of German purity law or things like that, because in reality it was really just a Bavarian law for the longest time and only became a German law a little over 100 years ago. Secondly, it's often talked about as the oldest food regulation law in Germany, which is kind of contradicting to the fact that some of these older local brewing regulations were passed as early as 1156. And last but not least, the term Reinheitsgebot, so purity law, wasn't actually used until the 20th century. The first time it was mentioned on record was during a session of the Bavarian State Parliament in 1918. So the term itself is relatively new. Fact is though that the purity law is considered a cultural artifact and an important part of Bavarian, and to a bigger extent, German history. It's known all over the world, and it's often viewed as a quality guarantee for beer, which is why many German breweries use the purity law for marketing purposes on their bottles and in advertisements. By the way, if you really want to understand how intertwined beer is with Bavarian history and culture, in 1844, when the Bavarian king Ludwig I raised the beer price due to a shortage in resources, thousands of Munich residents started rioting and destroyed breweries and beer gardens all over the city. Even the military sided with the rioters instead of intervening, so after only 4 days, the king ended up lowering the price back down. And something similar happened again only 4 years later during the March Revolution of 1848. Beer has also been an important source of income in Bavaria for centuries. On the one hand, because in the 16th century, Bavarian monarchs started raising a beer tax. On the other hand, because even throughout wars, natural catastrophes, and other crises, beer consumption has always stayed steady and has played a fundamental role in maintaining a healthy economy in Bavaria. Today, beer is still one of Germany's most consumed beverages. Germans drink over 90 liters of beer per person per year, which is over 3.5 bottles per week. But, and this might come as a surprise, Germany isn't actually the country with the highest beer consumption in the world. That title goes to the Czech Republic. Germany only ranks 4th or 5th place, depending on which ranking you look at. The most popular type of beer is by far the Pilsner, which was actually invented in the Czech city of Pilsen. So the most popular beer in Germany isn't actually German. This is followed by Lager and Hefeweizen, even though the actual order here, again, depends on which statistic you look at. In Bavaria specifically, Lager, Hefeweizen, and Dunkles, so Dunkel beer, are the most popular ones, which actually lines up with my taste as a native Bavarian. My go-to is definitely Lager, so Helles in German. The favorite beer brands in Germany include Beck's, Krombacher, Warsteiner, Erdinger, and Bitburger.
Warsteiner is probably my favorite brand of those. I do like Krombacher. I'm not a big fan of Beck's. Bitburger it's a Pils, so that's more along the lines of the Budweisers, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Erdinger is that and Warsteiner are pretty close. I do really enjoy Erdinger. But Beck's being number 1? I don't know. I disagree.
So only one brand from Bavaria is represented in the top 5. My favorite beer as a Munich native is the Lager by Augustinerbräu, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Augustiner is also one of 6 Munich breweries that are allowed to host tents at Munich Oktoberfest, where they all sell a specific Festbier, which I always describe as a stronger version of their regular lager. It usually has around 6% of alcohol, but Festbier is actually a Märzenbier, which is technically its own type of bottom fermented beer. But regardless of what it's called, people from all over the world clearly like it because 6 to 7 million liters of beer are consumed at Oktoberfest every year. One thing that surprises many people from outside of Germany is that we don't actually have a big craft beer scene compared to other countries. Here in the US, on the other hand, it almost seems like real beer lovers pretty much only drink craft beers, which is often beer that experiments with new flavors, is often very bitter like IPAs, and made by small independent breweries. Now, some people in Germany actually blame the purity law for the fact that Germany isn't quite keeping up with the craft beer movement, because of course you can't really experiment with chocolate or banana flavored beer if you're restricted to just 4 ingredients. But it's also not like craft beer is completely banned in Germany. There is in fact an exception from the law for so-called special beers, besondere Biere. You just need to apply for a permit. But even just by combining different amounts and types of malt, hops, yeast, and water, you can actually create thousands of different types of beer. That's why, despite the purity law, Germany still has over 5,000 different types of beer. Still, when tourists go to Oktoberfest for the first time, they're often disappointed to find out that there isn't a huge beer menu to pick from. I explained this a little bit more in this Oktoberfest guide video, but inside the beer tents, you're usually just asked how many liters you want, and then you'll get the Festbier of the brewery that the tent is run by. But maybe that is exactly what the secret of German beer is. It's simple, reliable, but of high quality, and in our eyes, and I'm including myself in this because I do in fact prefer a simple solid lager, it doesn't need to be changed or experimented with. By the way, if you want to know how all of these German beer brands are pronounced correctly, make sure to check out this video. And if you want to know what Munich Oktoberfest is like in real life, check out this video about Ben's very first time at Oktoberfest last year. And if you've always wanted to get yourself an authentic Bavarian beer mug like these, or an Oktoberfest themed t-shirt, today is actually the last day of my big sale on felifromgermany.com, where you'll get 10% off all beer related items. The discount will automatically automatically be applied at checkout. And yes, this does also apply to the personalized beer mugs that I customize for you by hand, so be quick. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm curious, did you know about the Bavarian purity law before? And what's your favorite type and brand of beer? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, Prost, and I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!
Well, that was interesting. I did know about the German purity law regarding beer, and I kind of have to agree with her last point there that sometimes the best is the simplest, right? And I'm not a huge IPA, I'm not an IPA fan at all. I don't like IPA, I can't stand the taste, it's way too bitter. Unfortunately, it seems like that is the biggest market here, at least here in Phoenix. When I go to the store and go down the beer aisle, it's 90% IPAs because there's every flavor under the sun with IPA. Strawberry, you know, mango, banana, whatever all these flavors are. It's absolutely disgusting. My beer should not be neon green colored. This is the color of beer. But I understand the craft scene, and I do I see the point of Germany not having such a huge craft scene like the US, but like she said, they do. You just have to apply for a special permit. But not being an IPA person, I don't mind that at all. I do like craft beer here if it's a darker beer. This is Kilt Lifter. It's brewed here in Arizona at Four Peaks Brewery. It is our favorite beer here, and it's a simple beer. You know, it's not some wild flavors and hoppy and any of that. So I think maybe that's why I'm drawn to the German beers, because they are just simple beer. Now, regarding mead, which is a whole other topic, now that's where I can get into all the different flavors. But regarding beer, my favorite, like I said, is Weizen, and I do like some ales. I do like darker beer. I don't like the hops, you know, so if it has lower hops taste, that's better for me. But I'm a simple guy. I just like a good darker beer. I'm not a big Pils fan, just because that reminds me of all the American beers, Coors, Miller, Bud, you know, Milwaukee. I can drink some of those, like Coors, you know, I enjoy, but it's a light beer. But after a while, it's just, it gives me headaches. I don't know if it's the Pilsner type that gives me the headache, but whatever it is, I would prefer to drink a good German beer over any of those. So I enjoyed that. Didn't really, I mean, it kind of answered the question on why, you know, maybe German beer is better. Just being simple, not adding all those extra ingredients in it isn't necessary all the time. And so for me, that makes it a better tasting beer. How about you? What is your favorite? Do you enjoy IPAs, the hops flavor, or do you like a simple just lager or ale, darker beer, a wheat beer? What's your preference? I can't wait to get back over to Germany. We are planning another trip here next fall, and I can't wait to get back and drink some actual beer. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, we'll catch you later. Bye.